joining in. Today is our first Hestia Academy Ask, and we're super excited and humbled to have Jeremy Rossman, the co-founder of Make School, to be our Academy Ask. And we're super excited to have Jeremy, our first guest, part of the series, and thank you again. So before we dive right into it, the purpose of having the Hestia Academy Ask, I just want to spend 1 minute on that. So our mission at Hestia Academy is to liberate you teenagers to self-learn and to create. And part of that, in order to make progress on that mission, we believe that it's important for you to meet other self-learners and learn more about their journey, ask them questions, and just humanize them. So Jeremy is one, a unique self-learner, and I'm very excited we're very excited to have him here and for you to get to know him. And please, ask questions, be curious, and excited for how this will pan out. So without further more, Jeremy, again, thank you so much for doing this, for taking the time, and let's just dive into it. If you can give a quick background, high level on your journey to the Hestia community, that would be fantastic.
Awesome. So hi everyone, my name is Jeremy. Thank you so much for having me, JC, and hello to all the Hestians. I am a Silicon Valley native. I was born and raised in the Bay Area, and was fortunate enough to see around me a lot of role models who inspired me to dream about what I could build with technology. But the story for me really became real when I was in high school, and when the App Store became a thing. I was in high school just at the moment in time when Apple opened up the App Store to third-party developers. So anybody, even an individual like me, could submit an app to the App Store. And a classmate of mine in my computer science class actually ended up building an app, launching it on the App Store, and selling 50,000 copies for 99 cents. That co-founder, by the way, that friend became my co-founder for Make School. And so I looked at that and I went, wait a second, something's changed. Before, you could dream of what you wanted to build with technology, you could learn these skills, but there was not really a way to reach people in the way that now the App Store allowed. It was a big change. And you think about all the cloud service providers that make it really easy to launch web apps, the App Store making it easy to launch mobile apps. That all really emerged when I was in high school. And so this really turbocharged my excitement for technology, because now it wasn't this delayed gratification. It wasn't like, oh, self-learn so that one day in your late 20s you can finally build a thing that people use. It was like, wait a second, if I learned these skills, I could actually start building things that people could have in their hands, on their devices, on their computers, and actually enjoy or benefit from, in the short term. And so this realization that the floodgates had opened was really that pivotal realization that led to the creation of Make School. Now, what's interesting about this context and why I'm excited for this session is that I always found myself to struggle with self-learning. And so I learned a lot about what environment and context helped me be successful. My co-founder is an interesting case where he I think has had a lot more success with independent self-learning. But we came together to start a school. I was a college student at MIT, again, really excited about this idea that I could be learning how to build things that people could actually use, and then disappointed by the overly, I would say, theoretical nature of my university studies, given that nobody was teaching me how to take advantage of this reality that I could build stuff and launch stuff. And so I ended up dropping out of school to start Make School. Make School is a school I wish existed. We're now a college in San Francisco with 200 students. And it's going to be interesting to kind of speak to a community of self-learners and tell you about my journey, both in starting a business, but also my trials and tribulations. And why Make School exists in part is because I failed to self-learn and then built a school that creates the framework so that others can succeed where I failed. And so I've had a lot of opinions about the progress and journey of learning. But I'm happy to answer any questions, whether that's about startups, raising money, education, a self-learning journey, tips on what you can do, to make the most out of your learning journey, entrepreneurial journey. Make School is almost a decade old now, and so I've seen hundreds of students take all kinds of different paths, and I've of course taken my own path, and I'm excited to share that with you today. So that's a bit about me, and yeah, JC, where do we start?
Great. Well, this was fantastic. So already two questions came up. One was, why did you leave MIT? And then I would add to that, as you explained why, also how did the transition happen?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Thanks, Nivedita. I it started off actually as a bit more modest of a proposition. So it wasn't that I was going to drop out. It was that I was going to take a semester off. The reason for that was that I had been working on a game for the App Store with a couple of friends at MIT. And I found that it was hard to balance my excitement for that and the all-nighters I was pulling, not for my homework, but for my project outside of school. And I couldn't make the two connect. Like I started taking even like game development and game design courses within MIT, but there still wasn't that framework to make this mobile game project integrated with my studies. And the second or third time that I realized I had pulled an all-nighter for not school but for my project, I thought, okay, I need maybe to take a semester off to work on this. So the initial impetus was actually not this, YOLO, college is useless, I'm going to leave. It was actually much more I did everything I could when I took a semester off to make it really easy for myself to return. There was no reason to not leave all the options on the table for myself, right? Now, once I took that semester off, I moved in with that friend I mentioned from high school who had built that app. We continued working on this game together. And then this actually dovetails into the second question from Lucas, which is like, how did you get funding and stuff? So I'll tell you, and also the third question from Nivendita, which is like, who funded this thing? So we took the semester off of college, and we figured if we'll see what happens in this semester. If nothing comes of it, then we'll go back to school. He was at UCLA at the time, and if something comes of it, then we'll continue. This was in the fall of 2011, so soon to be exactly 10 years ago. And what we did is we moved in together. We started working on this game. And then he told me about this incubator out in the Silicon Valley called Y Combinator. Now, at that time, Y Combinator had already funded companies like Reddit and Dropbox. And so, Dropbox was started by somebody from MIT. So like a friend of a friend at MIT knew the Dropbox founder and said, oh yeah, this Y Combinator thing, it's legit. You should look into it. So we looked into it and we opened their application. And we had never really interacted with people who could fund you, except to explore a little bit like what is the scene like in Boston where we were at the time to get funding for a video game. And looking at Y Combinator, their lens on funding is very interesting. They want to fund things that are going to become really, really big companies, because the way that the economy of venture capital works in the Silicon Valley is that most investments lose money, and then one of your investments turns into Airbnb or Facebook or whatever, and that makes so much money that everything else is a rounding error. And so they ask you questions in the application like, why is this going to be a big business? And we realized we wanted to do this because it was an incredible community of entrepreneurs they created. If they fund you, you get to participate in this 3-month program where every week they give you advice, invite guest speakers, have office hours. And so we thought, oh, perfect for us, like a structure to tell us how to be entrepreneurs is exactly what we want. But so we want to do it, but our current thing we're working on is not a good fit for Y Combinator, not a good fit for YC as it's known, because it was just a game. And it was an ambitious game, and it was starting to get popular. We had, 10,000 downloads. We had people starting to really like it, but it wasn't going to be the next Airbnb or the next Dropbox, right? And so we came up with a variant of this idea. We said, what if we made our production studio, because we had assembled a few artists to work on our game, got a little bit of funding from a grant from the school. What if we made those resources available to other student developers? What if we made a game studio where we published dozens, hundreds of games from all the people like us at other universities who are making these simple games, but that looked kind of ugly because some programmers can do amazing art, most of us can't. So what if we try to do that? So we went to Y Combinator with a variant of our idea that we hadn't validated yet, which was just, we know how to make games, we know how to make beautiful art for games. We're going to make a production studio, and we're going to empower every single other student developer like us. And we're going to create a huge game studio making simple games for the App Store that'll be really, we'll have a hit and it'll be great. And Y Combinator looked at this application and decided to interview us. And we practiced hard for the interview by talking to a bunch of people who had been funded by Y Combinator before. If any of you ever end up for the opportunity to interview with Y Combinator at some point in your lives, feel free to email me and I can do a practice interview with you. And I would love to pay it forward because so many other founders did that for me. And so we practiced, okay, what are they looking for? And what it came down to was answer their question they're asking, but nothing more. Don't over explain, just be very concise, be very clear and why you think what you're doing is gonna work, and be very honest about what you know and don't know. And so we came forward with very clear and concise explanations why Combinator places a really high value in founders who can be very clear about what they're doing, who can use the fewest words possible to communicate the most information, who are concise, who are not trying to use business speak, who are not saying we're going to leverage machine learning and AI to create synergies to no. Just like, we're going to build a video game studio where we publish games made by student developers around the world, and they're going to look professional because we have a team of artists who can do it at low cost. They're like, oh, interesting. They decided to fund us, and that's how we got our first funding. We moved to the Silicon Valley in January, back home, since that's where I was from, in January of 2012. And 3 weeks in, we realized that to get enough developers publishing with us, we should probably start making educational materials available to teach other students how to follow in our footsteps. So we started teaching iPhone app development the third week of January or so in 2012. And within a few weeks, we realized we were better teachers than we were game developers. And so we started planning a summer program. We would run a big summer program to teach a bunch of students how to make iPhone apps. And so that's how Make School started. It started as a summer program in the summer of 2012. We had about 30 students, then it doubled, and then in 2014, we decided, wait a second, people are learning so much in our summer programs. By then, by the way, we stopped being a game studio. The original name was actually Make Games With Us. We changed our name to Make School in 2014. And in 2014, we thought, wait a second, there's something bigger here. Students tell us that they learn more in 2 months in the summer with us than they did in years in college. So why don't we give them something that they could do that's more than just a summer program? And so we launched something that from 2014 to 2018 was an alternative to college, and in 2018 became actual college where you can get your bachelor's degree. Now, to answer the how did you get your first students question, which I think is relevant to this, right? We went in person, driving around the Silicon Valley to high schools after coordinating with computer science teachers, saying, hey, can we do a quick workshop, introduce your students to some iOS development concepts, and tell them about the summer program we're running. And the first students that we got were manually recruited by visiting all the high schools in the Silicon Valley. What's important to learn from that story is that you can overthink your initial user acquisition when you're building any kind of project or startup quite a bit. In the early days, what matters is not to go from 0 to viral in a few days. It's not like all or nothing. In the early days, what matters is to validate that you've built something that at least a few people really, really like, and that you have some ideas on how to find more. So the fact that we went around schools, recruited 30 students for a summer program, that they loved it, and that validated that we had something that was going to work from an education perspective, and that we could then try to scale that, was all we needed in the initial days to show progress to then go and raise more funding to build Make School further. So I see a lot of folks who are working on projects that have 0 users or just some friends are using, and they're not pursuing the first 100 people manually because they have this idea that really they need to work on their product until they're ready to launch, and then if they launch, it's going to go or not go. And the reality is much more, kind of stepping stones than that. Where actually the biggest mistake you can make as an early entrepreneur, and this would be, given that I was saying, what's the biggest tip for young entrepreneur? The biggest mistake you can make is to convince yourself that you're always too early to launch, or always too early to get your first 10, 20, 30 real users. And in many cases, it's actually worth trying to get those folks manually, see how they interact with what you're building, iterate based on their feedback, and not kind of wait until this all or nothing moment. There's a lot of anxiety that entrepreneurs have about launching something, an MVP, because you think, oh my gosh, imagine it's an app, right? You launch it and then you're like, people hate it, we're gonna get 1-star reviews in the App Store. Terrible. Okay, then pull the app down and relaunch under a different name. Big deal. There's 7 billion people in this world. So what if 300 of them downloaded your app, hated it, gave it a 1-star review? You're still better off than the other entrepreneur who never launched because they weren't quite ready and they didn't want to tell anyone. It needed to be perfect. And you've launched a thing, you've gotten feedback, you're iterating. You're further ahead than somebody who hasn't launched, even if you have a failed launch. And that's counterintuitive. In the early days, you can always change your name, you can always retry, but if you delay, you're really robbing yourself of the opportunity to get early market validation and, frankly, to get the signals you need to raise funding. Because for an early entrepreneur, there's only really 2 ways to raise funding. Either you find somebody or people who really believe in the idea, who are like, oh my gosh, this needs to exist and you're building it, this is great, right? Or they see that something is growing. And this is usually the one that works. What incentive does somebody have to invest in you today if you're not growing? They could always wait a couple weeks to see if you've launched, if you're going to grow. But if you're growing, then that's when they go, wait a second, something's growing here. I don't want to miss out. I want to fund this so I can grow faster. Something can't grow if it's not launched. So that's kind of the chicken and egg problem here. How useful / cool is it to be in the Silicon Valley? Says Daniel. Daniel, to be perfectly honest with you, that question is up in the air right now because with the pandemic, being anywhere doesn't really mean much at the moment. What is useful about being in the Silicon Valley in normal times is that you get a very quick immersion into an environment that gives you the appropriate social signals that are conducive to success. Notably, there's a lot of pressure to launch stuff because as you hang out with a bunch of other entrepreneurs, you realize, wait a second, they're launching things. They're not scared about getting bad reviews or launching an MVP. And this kind of helps you, it sets the pace. You see people around you who are launching, failing, succeeding, and you start subconsciously and consciously integrating that data into how you make your decision making. And you, if you're, for example, doing on the wrong track, like you should have launched 2 months ago, but you've been delaying by telling yourself you need to get it perfect, or you're focusing on the wrong things. You wouldn't get the signal as strongly anywhere in the world as you would in the Silicon Valley. And there's just so many common mistakes that early entrepreneurs make, from over focusing on certain aspects of the technology to being overly opinionated about what their product needs to be without talking to user feedback, to how even they go about fundraising or the connections they make to meet people who will tell them tell about them to other people who will then end up investing. All those networks and that social context is really, really helpful. Now, I'll give you a story related to that from Y Combinator. When I went through Y Combinator in January of 2012, I was one of only 2 French founders in the batch. It doesn't seem like it, but I grew up in a bilingual French-English household. And so I found the one other French guy in my batch. His name was Guillaume. And Guillaume and I would sit together every Tuesday at the Y Combinator dinners, at least for a little bit, to catch up. And Guillaume was working on an app called SocialCam. And SocialCam grew from 0 to 60 million users over the course of the 3 months we went through Y Combinator. 0 to 60 million. And these guys were ruthless. They launched stuff. Sometimes it broke. Sometimes they were pretty aggressive in promoting the app. But you know what? They set the freaking pace. I would come back the next week at dinner being embarrassed to not have tried to grow whatever I was building, because I knew I had to sit with Guillaume, and Guillaume was going to tell me, oh, this week we had 1 million new users. And I'm like, 1 million? If I told him, oh yeah, we got 6 more signups for our summer program, he'd be like, oh, that's cool. But deep inside, I would know that I probably hadn't focused on growth enough, and hadn't focused on validation. And here he was attracting millions of users, right? If you don't have people like that around you, that you can meet casually at a bar, at a house party, friend of a friend, who are growing businesses that are going to be billion-dollar businesses, you're missing out on useful social signals and connections that can help you succeed. When I was getting started, Instacart founder, before he launched, used to come hang out at my house. I was one of the first ever Instacart users. Coinbase, before they launched, used to hang out at my house. DoorDash, before they launched, used to hang out at my house. And those are just the consumer-facing ones. There's billion-dollar companies you haven't heard of where we used to hang out with those founders all the time. They set the pace, they set the culture, and I think they helped me understand what success looked like, and that helped me model and have the right role models. Let's see. What's my take on MBAs? I don't have a strong opinion, because there's everything under the sun. What I would say is you need to treat it like a product that you are trying to purchase. Oh, hi, Leon. I just realized we know each other. Thank you for asking. It's a product you're purchasing. So if you can't clearly define for yourself, I'm paying this much and this is the value I'm trying to get out of it. If you think about it the way that people tend to think about education, it's like, do it as a hoop to jump through, do it as a credential to get, do it as a stepping stone, do it as a gate. It's a gate that you see that you've been told you have to go through. Yeah, that I'm not so into. But if you go, hey, Harvard MBA, okay, I'm going to get an amazing network, I'm going to learn these things. I looked at the course catalog, some of these classes I'd be interested in taking, right? Seems like kind of obvious, but yet somehow a lot of people will jump into an MBA program and not check out the course catalog to be like, oh wow, yes, I would love to take all these classes. The thing is that the Silicon Valley in particular respects folks who've done things before, which creates a bit of a chicken and egg problem. But because there's not as much judgment about your qualifications, people are okay with you doing something as a first timer, but then will only respect like whether you've done things. And an MBA tends not to count in the Silicon Valley context. But that's only true in the Silicon Valley context. The world is much larger than the Silicon Valley. There are businesses, large and small, where having an MBA is very much valued. They just tend not to be as well represented in the sort of like tech entrepreneurship area. 762 is asking whether I face any challenges in the accreditation process. That actually, you may be surprised to find not so much. The reason for that is that we work with maybe the best accreditor in the United States. They're called WASC, when spoken out loud, WSCUC when written out because they changed their acronym. But they're under new leadership, a woman named Jamie Studley, who used to work in the Department of Education, the federal government under the Obama administration. And she is really pro-innovation. And so she's created a culture at the institution which is like, we shouldn't be dogmatic. We should be pro-innovation, pro-quality, pro-results, pro-sustainability, pro-student success. If someone does something different, we need to ask ourselves why we wouldn't be into it if it's working. If it's not working, then we're not here to make crazy bets, but they're there to look at things that are working and support them. And so the fact that I have faculty at Make School who don't have a master's or PhD is theoretically not permitted in the sort of traditional models of higher ed. Typically, you need a master's to teach bachelor's, but our accreditor is not going to let us like do anything, but agreed with our standards that will accept a certain amount of work experience in substitution for a master's, and we mostly hire faculty with work experience. So the challenges are more to do with just all of the like administrative burden that comes with being an accredited school, complying with federal regulations, making students eligible to take, grants and federal funding and things like that. It's less the accreditor and it's more everything that surrounds it. The accreditor has been actually delightful to work with. Is Make School somewhat like postgrad? It depends which postgrad, but we have, I'd say, a third of students come to Make School out of high school, a third of Make School come to students transferring in from another school because they didn't like the other school and they decided that we're very project-based, industry-focused. Our faculty are all former engineers. So a third from high school, a third transferring from elsewhere, and a third who are a little bit older, maybe like 24 and up. Maybe they went to college and didn't finish, or they already got a bachelor's, they want to get a second one, but in computer science, or they're going to college for the first time after a few years. Maybe they're a veteran, or they went straight into the workforce and things like that. So there's some folks who kind of treat it as a second bachelor's, which is maybe the closest thing, unless postgrad has a different meaning in your country. I'm not answering the right question, in which case I apologize. But I hope that in giving you that full perspective, at least I answered it. Daniel asked, which company culture works best? So what's interesting is there's not like one right answer. There are a lot of wrong answers, but there's not one right answer. I think the preferred company culture in the Silicon Valley is one that trusts that you've hired people who are smart and can make good decisions. So then the challenges are less about having to build process and structure to make sure people don't do stupid things, but rather to create process and structure to make sure people understand what their priorities are and what success looks like. What I've found is that when there's been missteps internally, it's not because someone is incompetent or doing something wrong. It's because there was not clear communication about what the timeline was, what success looked like, who needed to give what to who by when. And especially when there's multiple folks involved, who's responsible, right? If everyone thinks someone else is working on stuff, I mean, everyone, I'm sure, in the audience has had a group project go wrong, right? And sometimes they go wrong because people are incompetent, but you've also probably experienced the thing where you didn't have clear ownership over a certain area. And so nobody felt like it was exactly their job to finish this one section. And the next thing you know, the deadline is coming and it's not done. That happens a lot in companies. So I think a company culture that has kind of a trust but verify mechanic, where you make sure that you clearly communicate goals, timelines, what success looks like. You give people autonomy to succeed within that framework, but then you also verify kind of at the 80% completion point, up the hierarchy to make sure that things are getting done the way that they should. But I also think that there's a lot within those lines that I've described that you could do. Is a company culture fully remote or office based? There's going to be a lot of variance there after the pandemic, right? And part of the reason why there isn't a one size fits all answer is that there's all kinds of different humans, right? And that like different things. And even within a given organization, you can have different cultures, within the organization. What I think is most important when creating a company culture is that once you scale past the first, call it 7 or 8 people, to stop and take a look about what is true about your culture today that would make it difficult for a very talented person who is not like you to work there. And I think that was the moment. We had 7 or 8 people, almost the entire company lived together. So we would go to work at an office, we'd come back home, and most of us lived together. Those that didn't hung out in a living room together, and then went back to their home afterwards. We talked about work at work. We talked about work at home. And then we hired somebody who came into the office, worked super hard, but had a family to go home to, didn't live with us, didn't hang out in the living room. And all of a sudden they were like, I feel kind of out of the loop here. You all talk about stuff after work. I come in the next morning and things have changed. I'm not in the discussions. You don't write this stuff down because you all know each other. This isn't a super great work environment for me. And we realized, oh, wait a second, that's stupid. We shouldn't be a bad place to work for a brilliant person who has to go home to a family after work, right? So once you hit when you're four friends in a living room, all bets are off. But when you grow to that 7 or 8 person stage, I think the most important thing about company culture is to stop and think, how do we make sure we start trending towards being a good place to work for the variety of smart people we will need to be successful at the various points that they exist in their career and the various points they exist in their life. Can we start Make School with our university? Perhaps, actually, but there's a lot of possible answers to that question. You'd have to email me, jeremy@makeschool.com, with what you have in mind. Lucas asks, are we doing online school? Yes, we are. 100% online. We will continue to do that until we can go back to campus, and then we are going to also be offering an online forever program. So students have the option of just doing Make School fully online if they want, or coming to San Francisco once San Francisco reopens. How did MIT help you in your journey? Met great people was definitely a huge part of it. And then, unfortunately, in some ways, people tend not to question whether you have a baseline level of competence and know what you're doing if you're like, I went to MIT. And I'd be lying if I said that wasn't helpful. That's just, kind of a reality. I think May School is great, and I think probably many people in this chat would benefit from going there. But if you get into MIT, I'm not going to be the one to tell you not to go. It's quite the place. I really did not like the computer science curriculum when I was there, and I still tremendously benefited from meeting really smart people and being able to say that I went there. Do I think my location and environment has an impact? Yes, I think so. But can you replicate it online? Perhaps, but it has to be deliberate. It has to be deliberate. There's a saying you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, right? If you hang out with people who are growing businesses that are growing, that are doubling every 6 months and on track to be unicorns and building teams that are functional and raising money, and that's your social group, right? That's a big difference from being the only entrepreneur and trying to figure it all out. In a vacuum. There's a lot of folks who I've noticed on average, the further you get from tech hubs, it's not just the Silicon Valley, but it's places where there is a tech culture. The further you get from tech hubs, the more there's a variance in whether people's startups are emulating patterns of success or are maybe imitating what they see at a distance, but not actually doing the things that correlate to success. There's a lot in the media and the cachet about what a startup is like. And a lot of folks, I think, play startup, including, by the way, in the Silicon Valley. Some people come to the Silicon Valley to basically be part of the scene, to be able to say they're doing a startup. But a lot of people play startup. They go and they're like, oh, wow, now I can get invited to conferences and speak about stuff. That's cool. It's well, okay, but is that going to grow your business? And if somebody is not speaking at a conference and they're competing with you, then that's another hour, 2, 3, 4 that they're spending beating you in the market. And you don't think that way if you're not in the Silicon Valley. Now, Silicon Valley, shockingly, despite that, is not very competitive. People are very open with introductions. Nobody will shy away from telling you what they're working on. People will introduce you to folks easy peasy. There's never really a situation where you're like, oh, I can't tell you, it's secret. That's not a thing in the Silicon Valley. But at the same time, you see what success looks like. And you need to be somewhere where, and if that's an online community, I believe it. There's going to be online communities where this is the case. But you need to be somewhere where you can see what success looks like and where you're not just playing startup. Because essentially startups are organizations that are trying to build products that solve real problems and grow fast. And you can fail at any number one of those things, including you can not build, you can build but not a thing that solves a real problem, you could build a thing that solves a real problem but not grow fast. And to do all those things and do it well is an art and a science that has been well developed in tech hubs, and it's worth being immersed in such an environment, especially if it's your first time. Third time entrepreneur, you've seen it all, and now you want to go do it from a beach in the Cayman Islands, be my guest. But first time entrepreneur, different story. What do I think of decentralized apps? I think that it's possible to do really, really incredible things, and that there's a lot of headroom, and sort of like we have yet to see the most exciting stuff that are going to come out of DeFi and decentralized applications, I think. So yeah, I think more to come. There's kind of a Wild West nature still, I think, to that world. That means that there's a lot of insight mixed in with a lot of nonsense, and so it needs a little time to mature and really, scale to real impact. But it's getting there. Do I think a formal computer science degree is needed these days, given that online learning is growing so fast? No, but having real useful skills is needed these days, given that online learning is growing so fast, meaning you're competing with everyone who has a computer science degree and everyone who can self-learn. And there's broadly two areas that self-learners tend to shortchange themselves, and as a result, not be as competitive in the long term, call it a decade of a career, compared to somebody who has a computer science degree. The first area where a lot of CS degrees do a good job, and a lot of self-learners don't do a good job, is the formalized algorithmics, theoreticals, mathematical underpinnings of computer science, which, especially on a first job, it's very fashionable these days to be like, I didn't use any of my math or theory. It was, and there's some truth to that. Like, some universities teach math that's probably not relevant, like calculus is probably not that relevant to a lot of software engineering, but like linear algebra is. And so I think that a lot of folks who are kind of like, ooh, I can not have to do all the math and the algorithms, or I'll just learn it just enough to pass a coding interview, are, in this market, people pay a lot for software engineering roles, so you'll be fine, right? But on a decade's time scale, I would not bet on average that you're going to outperform in your career progression somebody who has that formal underlying knowledge. Once you get into writing code for things that are successful, you get into usually scale. You get into, therefore, usually interesting problems that can be solved better or worse depending on how strong your theoretical and algorithmic fundamentals are. And so those turn out to be in demand. And that's even more the case now that data science, machine learning, AI, ML, and all that are becoming a thing, because the folks who are really pushing the boundaries, earning the big bucks, are those who do understand the mathematical and theoretical foundation. So that's one that people find it sometimes useful to study in a more formal context, because theory can be better to learn in a encapsulated environment with experts, with support, so on and so forth. The other part that self-learners tend to do proportionally more of, but nonetheless is super important, and that computer science degrees traditionally don't do a good job of, but of course Make School does a great job, is to teach you how to turn those skills into real working products. So in the short term, what every company wants is an engineer who understands what it means to ship a useful product, who is able to take those skills and turn it into working functionality that is part of or entirely a product that they're going to be able to market to an end user of some sort. And the more that you can build up a portfolio, the better off you are. Where you get challenged as an online learner is you often run into roadblocks that limit your velocity. and you end up debugging for 6 hours something that a TA could have helped you do in 30 seconds. And so if self-learning and online learning was the end all be all, then there would be no demand for a make school. But we attract a lot of people who consider themselves to be self-learners but want the higher velocity. They want to be a self-learner in a context where they can also ping somebody who used to work at Google and have that person hop on screen share with them to help them, get unstuck. And so we've definitely seen self-learners totally get all the way there, not need a computer science degree, and make it into the industry. If you look as a proportion of total learners through a lot of different data sources, from percentage of learners who complete MOOCs and online courses to just even within my students, I would say it's somewhere between 2 to 5% of folks can really go all the way without a formal structure. And so already something like Hestia is actually boosting that percentage of like self-learners who are going to make it. And by make it, I mean like succeed as a result, like achieve tangible results for their career journey as a result of their self-learning, right? Like I self-learn a ton for stuff that is not useful to my career journey right now, like languages and history and philosophy and whatnot, right? But if you want to self-learn a skill, having an environment that optimizes your velocity and your focus is really important. So what we do, we curate the right things for you to learn. We bring in experts to help you learn it. We make sure that the velocity is high. And so that's why self-learners can sometimes bear to be going to a formal school, because we just accelerate them, and that's appealing. The reason that I failed at self-learning over and over and over again was that I could not get the discipline to learn consistently. It's like if I want to go to the gym, I can't do it alone. Never in my life have I kept up a gym habit for more than like 3 weeks without a gym buddy. When I've had a gym buddy, I've kept it up for years. Right? So there's a huge difference. I'm one of those people who needs a social environment. Hestia kind of can solve for that, right? It's a community of peers that keep you motivated and accountable, and you can set goals for yourself in a more tangible way. Make School is also part of what the value of Make School is, a community of peers for the same goal. So, the time investment, like people who succeed, I don't think there's marginal return beyond like the 40th or 50th hour a week. But there is return on those first 50 hours of time invested. And it is rarer for self-learners to be actually putting in 50 hours a week of learning. And then the second side of it is just getting stuck and being like, there's a meme, you run into a bug, you Google it, you find a Stack Overflow post, you go there, and the post has been there for 4 years and no one's answered, and you're like, oh, shoot, how do I solve this bug? And so having a community of people who can help you out just increases your velocity, increases the leverage on every hour invested, because it reduces the probability that you end up stuck for 6 hours, and 6 hours lost, that's a day of learning that someone else took one step ahead of you. So I'm not religious about, oh, thou shalt not get a degree, or thou must go to Make School to succeed, or, traditional degrees are useless. Like, those are all non-nuanced perspectives. Life is full of nuance. Any black and white perspective, anybody who gives you black and white advice, be very suspicious. But I'm giving you the features of formalized education and self-learning that I think are important, that you should seek to deliberately replicate were you to try to forego a formal learning path, and to try to figure out ways to recreate those features in your journey. Will Make School develop for all degrees, including CS? Maybe, but probably branching out from things that are computer science related, and also maybe tech related, like design on one end, or maybe computational biology on the other end, for example. And yes, I think we could do a collaboration with different universities. Do you think the market for developers will keep growing or begin to contract? How about for particular sectors of computer science, i.e. front end versus data science? So, this is one of those things where it's like, make enough predictions and some of them will be true and people will forget when you made wrong predictions. So you're asking me to predict something about the future, and here's the broad trend that I see. We still live in a world where a very large percentage of commerce, goods, services, and know-how has not yet been transitioned to its, let's call it, maximal digital potential. You still have businesses where things are done with filing cabinets, things are done manually, there's terrible software from the 90s running stuff. There's a lot of inefficiencies in our society. So even within current existing commerce, there's, I think, a large capacity to absorb more developers as digital transitions become more common. And don't forget that billion-dollar companies are being built not just in the United States, but also in countries around the world. in Nigeria, in Indonesia, countries with populations that are almost as large as the US, huge target markets, right, that are being served with rapid double-digit percentage year-on-year growth in their overall economies and in their tech sectors, with a huge amount that has yet to go digital. So even if you just look within like existing economy, like there's a lot of headroom to absorb more developers. Not only that, but developers who are there not just to, not just to like assemble things for, a front-end website for someone, but to actually bring and create new products and services in the world, create value out of things that weren't there before, right? Value is created, it adds to the overall size of the economy. And so forget even just the side of the economy that already exists, that hasn't transitioned, that will need developers to transition. You also have all the things that don't exist yet that are being created every single day by entrepreneurs around the world. And so as a result, it is hard to imagine that there's going to be a generalized contraction in the market. That does not mean that there couldn't be, along the way, localized contractions in certain subsegments. Maybe, in pure front end, for example, just assembling the front end of websites, maybe you could see a contraction just there. Or maybe it turns out at entry level data science, you have so many data analysts who can all do the same set of things, and they learn kind of the recipes and toolbooks. They can't take it to the next level. They can't be the designers, the creators, but they can go and take data sets and sanitize them and whatever. Maybe there's an oversaturation of those. But in terms of the fundamental, like higher order, I'm involved in some way in like creating a product, and I'm indispensable to that product's creation and not easily replaced by a drag and drop interface or by 1,000 other people at the entry level, there is, I think, headroom for the rest of our lives. It's unlikely to be to change. And I think if that prediction turns out to be false, it may be because I underestimate the pace at which automation or AI is able to replace certain parts of what today we use developers for. But even then, I think developers, it'll become a recursive value creation thing where it's like, oh, great, okay, now you can tell Alexa the website you want with words, and then Alexa's AI can produce the front end for you, so we don't need front end developers. But then you can use that to create so many more products and services that all of a sudden you're creating new businesses and you're transforming the economy even more digital. So then you need more developers to do the back end. And so at the end of the day, there's more need for developers anyway, even if AI can do these things for us, right? So I suspect net, we're going to see the market continue to drastically increase with perhaps some localized contractions. The way that you ensure yourself against that is that you make sure you're not a one-trick pony. You make sure you're not just learning recipes to follow. If I asked you to learn a new language, you wouldn't be like, only know JavaScript, can copy paste from Stack Overflow, but cannot, like, you need to be able to be flexible. And so long as you're flexible, and this is one thing that's really important to get out of a self-learning experience that we try hard to make sure you get out of our experience, you need to go beyond one language. If you only ever learn one language, then you're at risk, because one day when you have to do that first transition, it's your second language. But if you do one language, another language, by the time you enter the job market, you have to do your third, way easier. So the market will continue to grow, I believe, but you need to be flexible to be able to navigate around localized contractions and move on to the next thing that's growing, is my perspective. Do I have another startup that makes school? I do not. This is what I do full time. What is my process for hiring teachers at Make School? What qualifications do you look at before hiring someone? Very simply put, at least a couple years of engineering experience or a lot of teaching experience with a track record of doing things the way that other professors would not. Most of the folks that teach at Make School come from the engineering experience angle. So then it's like, you have at least 2 years of engineering experience, you want to teach, great, come interview, we'll have you do mock teaching, mock classes, and we have a sort of like, we'll know it when we see it kind of perspective. Of course, it's more documented that we have rubrics and things like that, but if you have the experience and we invite you in and you teach a great sample class based on materials we give you, you know your stuff technically, you're a good explainer, and you're good at helping students learn things because we'll put you in front of a panel of students and things like that, that's great. We don't want to have too many preconceived notions about what a great teacher should look like. We want to make sure you know your stuff and you have good communication skills. If you're coming from an academic background, we will still consider you, but we need to see that you're not like the other academics. You're not just a prof who throws up slides and lectures for an hour straight. You're somebody who is coming to us because you've been frustrated about the mold that you've been stuck in and you want to teach in a more progressive way. And so we do have a couple of people, especially teaching more of like theory classes, for example, who maybe came to Make School out of their PhD, but who have a demonstrated track record of teaching, and like their students at previous institutions love them. And that's pretty a good sign too. Um, so what do you think about self-learning programming versus physics? Programming seems to be learnable by doing projects, while physics seems to be exercise-based. Oof, that is a good question. So on the spectrum of self-learning, I think that the closer you get to something being a skill that integrates multiple different disciplines or facets, the harder it is to effectively self-learn. So on one end of the spectrum, if I wanted to just self-learn, French Revolutionary history, I could do a lot of reading, and that's great. And maybe I could talk to a scholar or something, but I could do a lot of reading, and like probably Wikipedia can get me a good way there, right? If I want to learn a language, reading the Wikipedia article in a language is not the way you're going to learn a language, right? And learning programming is more on that end of the spectrum. I think as a result, net, it tends to be a little bit harder, assuming that you have the same level of intrinsic motivation. The difference being, I think, often, while physics may be, all else being equal, easier to self-learn because you are learning a relatively stackable, narrow set of, rarely will you lose a day of physics learning because you can't debug the answer to your own physics problem that you wrote yourself. And that's not a thing, right? Like you're like, oh, like balance this beam and the fulcrum, whatever, and then you do, and then like there's no such thing as like, oh yes, and then my answer didn't compile, right? But you can still try to solve a problem in computer science and then be stuck for a day, right? Like, and so there's kind of a procedural difference in computer science. However, that can be outweighed by the intrinsic motivation you get due to the fact that computer science allows you to learn through projects. And so even though the project-based side is maybe a higher degree of complexity, integrating more different potential failure points, your conceptual understanding, your actual like, whoops, you made an error, the configuration of your environment, you can lose a week in computer science studies because you couldn't install a freaking package onto your computer properly, right? Like, what? That doesn't happen in physics, but all that can be counterbalanced by the fact that it can be more fun because projects are more fun than just doing exercises in physics. So I think if you were intrinsically motivated the same for both, you'd have an easier time going to PhD level and beyond in theoretical physics solo, simply because the roadblocks are fewer, but the intrinsic motivation maybe counterbalances. That's just my perspective, though. It's a very complex and interesting question. Do I like functional programming and the more theoretical aspects, i.e. category theory? Yes, I generally, I don't get a chance to do as much theory and like learning as I used to be perfectly honest. Makes me sad. But yes, that was kind of I was very much I like math and theory and I like building cool things. That was me. Yeah, and I live with, talk about benefits of being in Silicon Valley. Like I had roommates, at one point, one of my roommates was like, yeah, I'm learning category theory for fun. It was just that's a normal thing. It would not be weird to go to the bar down the street from my house here in San Francisco, which, okay, right now it'd be weird because COVID, but pre-COVID or post-COVID, it would not be weird to go to the bar and for there to be two people, talking about category theory at the bar. Like that would be relatively normal, or their favorite JavaScript framework or whatever, or fundraising. Like it's almost gotten, people here are annoyed by how much that's true. Like it's so true that like you go out in San Francisco and you like tune into conversations and people are talking about tech in all of its various forms everywhere. So, but yes. Do I miss making games like War Squared? Jordan knows the game that I made before dropping out of MIT was called War Squared. The sequel I made while we were transitioning was called Realms at War. And then we stopped making it to start teaching. I do miss making games because I enjoy building things that make other people happy. But you know what else I've built that sometimes makes other people happy? A school. So that's kind of nice. People complain a lot about games they care about to the people making the game. So I got a bit of an early taste of what it was like to change something in a game that made people care a lot and send me angry emails. People also care a lot about their school. And since we are not perfect, because no school is, students care a lot about letting us know when we're not. So I've had I had a interesting transferability of skills from being able to take criticism. But I would say just I miss building like a product that people use and get joy and delight from. These days, what am I playing? I'm playing a game called They Are Billions, which is a survival real-time strategy game where you try to build a little city in a map full of zombies and not have your city be overrun by zombies. So it's like kind of nice art style and you're like, planning your economy and stuff. And then there's zombies. So I find in a lot of forms of entertainment and media, if you just do plus zombies, like it can get pretty interesting. I don't know if anyone's seen like Pride and Prejudice and zombies. Pretty solid. Or the Kingdom, the Korean Netflix, well, it's in the US on Netflix, the series, like Korean historical drama and zombies. It tends to go well together with a lot of things. Zombies are kind of like avocado seasoning on creative media, I think. So real-time strategy with zombies works great. We'll stop answering questions now. Okay, that's what it says. That's what Hestia says. All right, I will stop.
I think there was one more question
from Jack, JC.
Yeah, there was one question from Jack. We can take that.
All right. Oh, that was directed at the people asking questions, not at me. Gotcha. Yeah. I swear I'm a little smart, but yes. Okay, Jack. Do I have any advice for choosing who I ask for investment in a startup? Well, there's a little bit of a morality angle, obviously. If it's like, some people are like, I won't take money from oil tycoons or whatever. But generally, I would worry about this problem when you have people who want to give you money. You can always say no after someone says, yes, I'll invest in you. And you're like, actually, no. But, until then, I wouldn't worry about it too much. A meeting with somebody, they're like, I'm not sure if I want this person's money. Probably good practice still to pitch and so on and so forth. If they say yes, you can always say no. What's more important is the terms under which you take money. And so Y Combinator has actually put out a lot of blog posts about standardized deal terms. They have sample documents you can use. How much of your company should you sell at various stages when taking investment? How much control should you give up? These are the questions, right? At the end of the day, if you take money from somebody who's kind of whack and turns out to be annoying, but they have no control over your company, okay, it's annoying. But if they have control over your company, that's a problem. Similarly, if you strike a non-standard investment deal, you take investment money in a way that is not what professional investors would expect, you can kind of screw yourself, because later you're like, okay, great, I'm ready to raise more money. And then, you go to a Silicon Valley venture capitalist and they're like, wait, you took 50 grand from your uncle's roommate and the deal is inked on a napkin and the terms are uncertain. Like, go clean that up before we invest, because we need things to be kind of buttoned down. So the who, I wouldn't worry about so much from like a tactical perspective, other than to pursue people who invest in the category of thing that you do. So the best way to figure that out is to find startups in the same category and then go on the website called Crunchbase to figure out who else has invested in them. Because if you go to My Investor Learn Capital to pitch your new crypto startup, they're going to be like, it's in the name, y'all, Learn Capital, we do education. If you go to Crypto Ventures to pitch your new VR startup idea, they're going to say, hey, Crypto Ventures, what are you doing? Right? So obviously go to people who are interest aligned or sector aligned, and a great way to figure that out is to see who else has invested in companies that are in the same sector. In the early days, the less money you're raising, the fewer there are rules. Family, friends, this and that, but do it on terms that are correct. And you can turn to Y Combinator for a lot of good advice on that.
Cool.
All right.
Cool.
Wow. That hour went by so fast.
Yes, it was.
Did I just talk for an hour straight? What? Anyway, thank you all for these amazing questions. This is like solid Q&A. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jeremy. So before you all tune out, we have some super exciting news to share. And given how much you all seem to have enjoyed Jeremy and his presence, super excited to announce that it's also Jeremy's joining our board of directors at Hestia Academy. And so he'll be helping us in building a better academy for all of you and future Hestians. And also at some point, Jeremy mentioned about how Make School and the environment that they're building helps you keep moving forward faster. And this is something that you all joined Hestia to do. And we believe that, we want you to keep doing what you love, which is learning and building, but go faster and further. And that's one way that, and today we're announcing one way that Make School and Hestia Academy will be cooperating and partnering up, which is through mentorship and the Discord channel that Jeremy will tell you more about it now, and then we'll announce it soon after in our Discord community.
Yeah. So we first of all, I'll be joining your Discord channel. It's lonely in the pandemic anyway, so hopefully I can get a chance to get some socializing in while helping you with whatever you're doing. But also we have a number of Make School students who really enjoy mentorship and who have proactively identified themselves as wanting to be to volunteer as mentors for organizations that are interest aligned. And Hestians are all doing exactly the kind of thing that our students love mentoring and helping folks with. And so we are going to be inviting our students to hang out in your Discord as well, and hopefully get a good representation of different disciplines. Make School has concentrations in front end and back end and mobile and data science. And so to get students who are in there that you can ping if you ever need that velocity boost, a person to help you debug, someone to help think through the scoping of a project, or just to be perfectly honest, when you have a problem you can't solve. So we're excited to have the two communities meet, and we'll be sharing the opportunity with our Make School students. And I know we already have a whole bunch who love to mentor like it is nobody's business. So we look forward to you all having the chance to meet them. And I just, when I learned about Hestia, I have this strong belief, as you can probably guess, in having some kind of formal structure to support students, because like I said, that 2 to 5% make it without structure. There's some survivorship bias, but the reality is most of us do better with community and with support. And for someone who is such an impressive self-learner as JC, and as I know many of you are, to see something come out of that kind of solves the ultimate prototype, like template of a problem that you always want to see a startup solving, which is a problem that the founder has deep, intimate knowledge with. To see this organization come together to try to serve folks and help them along their journeys was really, really inspiring to me. And I love the idea, I have one foot in this organization, Make School, that is formalized. It gets you a bachelor's. Every hour is accounted for. You're doing something. There's credits that you earn towards a degree. And then to also have a chance to support and be involved in an organization that has a bit more of a free form, yet really endless with possibility type of structure that is still more than just go forth and self-learn, but actually a group of folks who are supporting each other and doing that. So I mean, just seeing how it's come together so far has been really encouraging to me, and I just can't wait to support you all in your journeys and support Hestia as it grows, and hopefully as hundreds more join the community and become the leading force for self-learning together. That's kind of, we defined a better way to frame that, but yeah, really that's what it is. It's self-learning together. So thank you all for your time. Thank you, JC, for inviting me, and all the best in your journeys. If you want to learn more, you always can shoot me an email. It's just my name at makeschool.com. So.
Okay, thank you so much, Jeremy. Thank you everyone for tuning in, and hope to see you at the next Hestia Ask.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks.